Hi, welcome back. I'm Jayne Turk, and this is Let's Talk Turkey. Today, we're going to be talking about why do we believe weird things. And so, as I was getting into this topic, I was thinking about the very first time that the story came around the internet that, oh my gosh, someone was discovered in a complete diving suit up in a tree, died of drowning in the middle of a desert. And I was like, oh, yeah, I actually believed that. And they talked about how he had gotten scooped up in a water drop when they were dropping water to put out a fire, which is a thing that happens. And I didn't think much about it, and I went on with my life. And then CSI did an episode even that included this storyline. And then other stories started coming out that had the same feel to them. The person waking up in a hotel room in an ice bath with written in their own blood on the wall, call 911, and their kidneys had been harvested and they needed to get to the hospital immediately. Doesn't sound believable now any more than the Nigerian prince who is trying to give you millions of dollars. But we do believe a lot of things that don't seem weird to us at the time we believe them. So let's talk about that. And let's start by talking about sharks. So, as we get into this example, we're going to talk about three things that kind of go together: cultivation theory, mean world syndrome, and confirmation bias. But let's start by talking about, sharks. So, this shark was caught here where I swim almost every day. And I'm looking at that bad boy, and I'm going to say he's about 5 feet or so long, right? And how this comes into being a thing in cultivation theory. And cultivation theory is the idea that the more you are exposed to something via media, the more it becomes part of your truth set, right? It becomes more a part of the way that you see the world. So, my oldest daughter, the mother of my grandchildren, sends me these videos, these pictures, tags me in posts all the time talking about sharks because where I live and where her grandkids like to swim in the ocean with me, there are lots of sharks. And for those of you that either, grew up hearing the shark stories or watching Shark Week or Sharknado, or old school like me and grew up with Jaws, sharks seem terrifying, right? But they're really not. I think the average year has only 13 shark bites. So the statistic I've been quoting to her and to my grandkids is that you're more likely, if you visit New York City, to be bitten by a human than you are if you visit any ocean in the world than you are to be bitten by a shark. So I looked for a graphic for that. And I love this one because even though the words say, hey, you're more likely to be bitten by a New Yorker than a shark, the image is this terrifying shark picture, right? So it reinforces the idea, at least visually, that sharks are a thing that we all need to be really terrified of. Now, I personally have a two shark rule. So if I'm swimming in the ocean and I see two sharks, it's time for me to get out. One shark, we're still good. Two sharks, time for me to get out. But the cultivation theory says the more that I see these images, the more afraid I'm going to be. And we, in fact, then lead that to believe the next part of it, that the world is a scarier and more dangerous place than it actually is. And confirmation bias comes into play, and that's the where you're confirming the thing that you agree in because your algorithm and your media sources and selective perception all combine to reinforce the idea that you originally held to be true. So, prolonged exposure to media shapes our perception of reality. That's confirmation. That's cultivation theory. Confirmation bias, then, is that says once we believe this, we're going to find more evidence to support it. So, we grew up hearing about stranger danger, right? But statistics say that We're not really in danger from strangers. We're just not. But we live in a world where that's what makes the news, right? We don't live in a world where we would see this headline, even though that happens millions of times a day. We don't see this headline. We don't see just another Tuesday, nothing happened, because why? That wouldn't be interesting. Nobody would buy that. Nobody would click on it. It's not rage bait or clickbait or anything, because it is what is normally happening. So, our worries about stranger danger, our worries about our kids being kidnapped or you being kidnapped. I had a student tell me that her mother took a picture of her every single day so she would know what she was wearing. And I immediately felt guilty. I didn't take a picture of what my kids were wearing, and I wouldn't have remembered. But the reality is, we're not really at risk from strangers. In fact, we are significantly less likely to be harmed by a stranger than by someone we know. And even with that being said, the numbers are 1% and once in a lifetime. What I mean by that is that you are only likely to be a victim of a violent physical altercation 1% a year, or a little bit more than 50% of you once in a lifetime. So most people are not likely to be victims of a violent altercation. We're just not. So let's move on and talk about what's beautiful, because that's way more fun than stranger danger. So, who determines what beauty is? So, I have some pictures of here from the 1400s, way back when we kind of started this conversation. I have some pictures from the 70s and some pictures from today, and I want to share them with you so we can talk about what's beautiful. And we're going to start by talking about hairlines. I did not know this. Did you know that back in the 1400s and that era, that people plucked their hairline or shaved it so they could have 5 heads? Mm-hmm. So this was beautiful. To me, that looks like someone who needs a Nutrafol. And again, I can admire the tapestry and I can admire the beauty in the outfit, but it's not something I would wear. How about you? Or how about this? And we can look at hairstyles, we can look at makeup, we can look at what clothes reveal and what they cover. Please look at eyebrows. Please definitely look at eyebrows. And again, hairlines. And then we get to 1970s. And I definitely admit to having had that haircut. I did not look like Farrah Fawcett, but I definitely tried to have that haircut. And we can see again, look at eyebrows, look at hairlines, look at hairstyles. And you can't see it in these pictures, but this is the beginning of the teeth whitening standard. So, and it's just still a standard in the United States, not worldwide. You'll notice that if you watch a lot of foreign movies or television. But back in the 50s and 60s, and maybe even a little bit into the 70s, natural, normal teeth were a thing. And then we started seeing teeth whiteners and veneers, caps and crowns to make your teeth look white. Teeth are not naturally ever bright white, but now, and we'll get about this, I think, on the next slide, but I want you to pay attention to those things as we scroll through. More styles from the 70s. I think I have those shoes. And I might have had that crop top. And now we get to today. So, what do our influencers look like today? So, again, pay attention to eyebrows and hairlines and hairstyles. We're going to talk about tattoos next. Are we seeing some themes here? So, hair, teeth, eyebrows, and next, muscles. So, my husband's been watching a lot of Gunsmoke lately, reruns. And a young Burt Reynolds is figured prominently in some of the episodes. So I pulled up this old image. Burt Reynolds posed nude in the very first issue of Playgirl, and he was considered to be hot. And I think it's interesting because he has very little muscle tone and lots more body hair than we would think is appropriate today. And his eyebrows are not manscaped at all. And so then I'm like, who are we looking at today? So I pulled up this picture of Jason Momoa, which shows significantly more defined muscles and less body hair. Although, interestingly, the three images I pulled up of guys all had facial hair. And so then I had to pull up the sexiest man alive, Jonathan Bailey, who also has significantly more defined muscle tone than Burt Reynolds did back in the day. So, and before we leave this slide, we can pay attention that Jason Momoa has tattoos. What changes going forward? So we're going to start with, I think this is a really unfortunate picture of me in 1982, and I thought I looked stunning. And you can note both my hair and the dress I was wearing, which was considered the height of bridal fashion. Oh, it wasn't that one. It wasn't that one. Those are tattoos that we were looking at. Let's see if my so those tattoos, I wanted to talk about tattoos. So you can see tattoos through the ages, and a couple of them are in fact mine. Not that one. I could not sit still for that long. And I guess the unfortunate image of me in the dress disappeared. Okay, so what's next? Oh, maybe this is the image of me in the unfortunate dress. Yes, it is. Okay. So, yeah. My kids and grandkids definitely made fun of this picture. So, what are we going to look like in the future? And there's all kinds of things to consider. So, this image I thought was very interesting because it talked about the changes that technology was going to make to our physical appearances, including metabolic reprogramming. And the advancement of weight loss drugs like Ozempic is definitely going to change the way that people look. It also talks about injectables. So we can see on the left someone who's got some advancements in technology, and on the right, that's what they're anticipating will look like in about 2050. And here's where I was talking about with the teeth whitening. So you may have seen the commercial with the tissue test to hold up to your teeth to see if they're in fact that white. And it's a really interesting standard because for decades, people with teeth that were too white were roundly mocked. And now it's such a standard that if you're going to go into movies, television, anything that has you up on the screen, you are probably going to have veneers or caps put on your teeth to make them artificially white because naturally your teeth don't get to be the color of a bleached tissue. And this is what is anticipated to be fashion in 2050. I rather like it. I'm not sure that it's something that we're all going to be wearing, but certainly an interesting idea. And I want to think about what are your kids going to be making fun of you for wearing. I know that not only do my kids have fun looking at my old photos and laughing at me, but insultingly, they have more than once come over to go raid my closet for Halloween. Not my closet of things from 50 years ago, but my closet of things that I'm wearing today. So, what's next for you? This week, we are continuing our great adventures. So, continue your media tracker. This is week 3. So, you hopefully did your media tracker in week 1. You're going to do it this week, and you're going to do it, I believe, in week 7. And so what that media tracker is asking you to do, it's asking you to choose 3 days out of the week. And then on those 3 days, make sure that you are tracking all the media that you're consuming. And remember the one-off things. Remember the billboards as you drive down the freeway, or other ways you're encountering media that aren't just your phone or your television. And you're going to continue working on paper 1. So hopefully you went and looked at that video, and I mentioned it in the last video. You looked at the specific video I made you for paper one. And let's talk about reading. So hopefully you're in a groove now and you know how to do chapter notes. So this week's assigned reading is chapter 2. And you remember you get to focus on one area of the chapter that you like, that you particularly want to pay attention to. That's awesome. And you're going to start with the chapter number and the title, the topic that you've chosen. Remember that big bold print somewhere on that page. And then define, use a sentence, explain, make sure that you know exactly what it is you're talking about. Then the most important part, or one of the two most important parts of the chapter notes, the why should I care question. And so this is going to be individual to you every single week. And this is going to be a thing that you are going to just reflect on for a sentence. We're good there. And then give me the details. So what are the elements in this that that you want to remember, and as much detail for those as you need. Remember, your chapter notes should only take you about 5 minutes. You are assigned the entire chapter. You only have to write one chapter note on one tiny area of the chapter, though. And then we're to this week's conversation. So, as always, this week's conversation starts out with a video reflection. So, every week, we're going to have a 3-part conversation, each part worth 5 points. And the first part is something from the video, anything from the video that was impactful to you, and then tell me why. So, a quick sentence or two. This week, however, I've added a feedback request. So you hopefully have noticed in the adventures, it says, I'll be right here when you're finished. And I want to know, did you notice that I said that? Did it have any impact on you? Do you like that in there? Is that a thing that helps keep you connected to the class, or you don't care about? Anyway, I'd love your feedback. And then we are on the part of the conversation with your classmates. So the second part is frozen. There we go. And this week's discussion board question is to describe a belief, assumption, expectation, fear, opinion, or afterthought that may have been influenced, or attitude that may have been influenced by the media. So we know that a whole bunch of them are. So I want you to pay attention to the things that you're aware of. What did I have influence in the media? So talk about that. And then looking back, what role do you think the media played in shaping that perception? So maybe how you encountered it, what things you saw or heard. And do you think that media still influences your thinking about this issue today? Why or why not? So we just want to analyze your thinking process, right? Because if we can identify how we're influenced and in what ways we're influenced, we can also decide and make choices about how we want to be continuing to be influenced. And the final part of the conversation is to continue it. So this is asking you to respond thoughtfully to at least classmates as you are every single week. And again, continue the conversation with them. Don't just do filler words, but actually interact with 2 different classmates. And that brings us to trail notes. One of the most powerful things you can do is to ask yourself, how did I come to believe this? Not because every belief is wrong, and I am not going to pretend that I am the keeper of truth. I am absolutely not. The reason you want to ask this question, though, is because understanding why we believe something helps us to become more thoughtful communicators, and it helps us to have our beliefs align with the truths that we can access. And before you go, curiosity is one of the best tools you'll ever develop. Keep asking good questions, even about your own assumptions. And in case no one said it today, I love you. This has been Let's Talk Turkey with Janie Turk. Have a wonderful week.